Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I am joined by Greg, recruiting extraordinaire, also of Hail Varsity, and we are back for another recruiting question of the week. Greg, how are you?
I'm well. I'm refreshed now. We're back, and I'm feeling back to normal now.
It's funny because like in our world, you may be feeling more quote unquote normal because the early recruiting period has come and gone. But for most people watching this, you are in the thick of the holiday season. Understand that like for everyone, it's a very busy time. In fact, I have had to look at the calendar multiple times to like even know where I'm at right now in the year. Just this time period is always a little bit bizarre. So if you are like, wow, for me, it now feels very, very wild. Totally get it. You are in the thick of holiday season, kids getting out of school for breaks, news that is always just never ending. So like, got it. For us though, recruiting has kind of settled itself out, at least for right now. There's plenty to still talk about. I know before anyone comments, you're going to ask about transfer quarterbacks. Here's all I'm going to say. Make sure you head to hailvarsity.com or go back through some of these recruiting questions already, because we've talked a lot about transfer quarterbacks to this point, and we will continue to talk about them. I just don't want anyone to think we're ignoring the elephant in the room, which is a transfer quarterback piece, which again, we have talked a lot about so far, and until we kind of have a little bit more, we're going to just table that conversation for another hot topic. I've seen a lot of this, in fact. So Greg was asked by Union Park on Twitter, how long before high school recruiting will be less important than recruiting the portal? Greg, I have seen this question so many times. It has come up more than I have even realized between Facebook, Twitter, YouTube about high school recruiting not mattering at some point here soon. What do you think?
You're right. This is a huge topic right now. And I think for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I think the success that we saw Michigan State have with the transfer portal and it being kind of a stated thing that's how they rebuilt their program and their team, and then ended up having success with Mel Tucker, to the point to where he ended up getting that huge contract in large part because of his success with the transfer portal. I think that has the portal on everyone's mind. Then I think I keep saying the explosion of the transfer portal because it seems like every year it gets bigger and bigger, right? And that's been a really interesting thing to see kind of unfold. And so that has it even more on people's mind. And then probably the biggest reason here locally to kind of bring it all home is that Scott Frost himself came out and said that they were going to focus more on the transfer portal and on JUCO, which they did bring in a JUCO player, to be able to immediately help the roster for 2022 because they have to get these wins in 2022, right? And so for all of that, it's all people are thinking about. And so I understand why people are asking this question, right? Because we've talked so much about the portal, but I do think that it's harming high school recruiting, because it in a lot of cases, but not all. So in Nebraska's case, I do think that it hurt high school recruiting. I think that this is a recruiting class that Nebraska is only taking, well, as of right now, 13 high school recruits, right, and one JUCO player for the 2022 class. That would have been more if Nebraska was not trying to take 7 to 10 players in the transfer portal, right? And so it is, if you just look at the raw numbers, hurting Nebraska's ability to go out and get high school players because they need these guys for more immediate impact. But I think the jury is still out on the long-term impacts if this is going to be something that we see on a normal basis, because it's not really that sustainable.
Yeah, and it feels like the one thing that I kind of watching the conversation surrounding recruiting high school versus transfer portal junior college players is it's really a conversation about immediate needs versus long-term depth. And if you only move toward recruiting the transfer portal, you are going to end up constantly having to shift, like your depth is going to constantly be taking a hit because you won't have players for more than a year or two, maybe 3 if you're lucky right now with the COVID bonus year that most players have. But at some point, typical transfers are going to be about 1 to 2 years. And you're not going to be building any kind of solid foundation of depth. So for me, I've always really viewed, and I still do, despite the fact that the transfer portal has become sort of like this giant talking point this off season, in addition to even junior college recruiting. I think that is sort of the nature of where we're at right now. One, with the fact that there are these bonus years, because a lot of team numbers have taken a hit, and also they're having to now factor in the fact that like they don't get like free scholarships now, if you will. And I used free in the sense of like the numbers didn't count for 1 year. Now they do. So like this changes how rosters have to be configured, how coaches have to consider the use of their rosters. It just feels like this year is a little bit of a weird outlier, just a strange outlier, I should say. And it'll eventually kind of sort itself out, if you will, because like I said, that high school recruiting is so key, because in many ways it's your depth. Now you do take the risk of those high school recruits ending up coming in, not liking the fact that they're behind other players and transferring, and then we're right back into this conversation. But I do think you still want to try to keep a pipeline into high school recruiting as much as you can, because otherwise you're really not ever going to be able to build a solid foundation for your team, because you'll be constantly rotating and turning that roster over.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do that, right? You're walking a tightrope to be able to really turn that roster over on a yearly basis, and still kind of keep that culture and continuity within the team. The one thing about this that has surprised me, and I thought as you were talking about kind of the long-term impacts and having those short-term players come in, is that we're all actually seeing a little bit of a shift away from like or at least for Nebraska's case, the 1-year grad transfer versus bringing in transfers that have multiple years of eligibility. And now that's on purpose. And I think that speaks to your point, right, about being able to build that long-term depth, because it makes it really hard to continuously bring in, say, Samari Toure's into the fold and have them hit right away and have them kind of ingrained into the team and it going very seamlessly. Like that's the exception more than the rule, right? It's a lot lower bar to clear if you bring in a guy that has 2 or 3 years of eligibility left, and then he can kind of come in and like more slowly get acclimated to everything. Maybe he plays right away, maybe he doesn't, but you've got that guy for multiple seasons.
It's definitely, I understand where people are coming from with the high school recruiting. I definitely think 2020 and 2021 have created a bit of a monster to overcome for high school recruits, especially when we talked many times before about just a lot of these players hadn't had the opportunity to be seen by coaches. Official visits had taken a hit for a while. In-person visits had taken a hit. They weren't able to really necessarily get film out there if their seasons were canceled or disrupted in any way. So high school recruiting, for a number of reasons, has just taken a hit in the last year and a half. And because of that, I think that also has shifted a little bit of how high school recruiting has sort of shaped up for 2021. But all things start to, just like all peaks and valleys, things come, they go through waves. And I think high school recruiting will probably see a shift back to what we're more used to heading into the 2023 class. I keep having to remind myself that this was the 2022 class, where we're at right now, and hit like the time point. I think, at least personally, and Greg, you can tell me if you think the same, I think we'll see it stabilize heading into 2023, and especially then when you look to 2024. I think really, in my opinion, the transfer portal will continue to be really this place where you can go, like junior college recruiting, to find immediate needs of people who can come in and within either immediately or within a year or two make an impact. But that high school recruiting will ultimately still remain what it is, because you want that depth, you want the ability to train and develop players in your system the way you want to. And ultimately, I think that will remain the base of recruiting, even if it feels a little bit strange right now.
Yes, I do absolutely agree with that. And I think that it would be interesting to see the teams at the top of the recruiting rankings that are also continuously winning. Like, I would assume, and I'll go look, that those teams are not bringing in 10 transfers in a season and off season, right? That those teams are continuing to build that depth and develop the guys that they've had in their systems for that very reason that you were mentioning. You want to be able to develop them in your processes and bring them up that way. I think that the transfer portal will continue to be a quicker fix for teams that need to turn things around. And Nebraska is in that case right now, but I think that in Scott Frost's perfect world, I would assume that he wants to be able to get back to leaning more towards those high school recruits versus always having to go to the portal. And unless they find like a huge amount of success and think they can replicate this yearly, which would be really hard to do, I see them going back to wanting to recruit more high school.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, the one thing that so many of you pointed out, and I still agree with this, you will see a shift in how recruiting departments work. You will have people who will continue to only be focused on high school, but you will also see people start to be hired and focused on just the portal, just junior college recruiting, which junior college recruiting has always had its own like focus when we talk about these things. So the transfer portal is just going to be sort of its new piece to all of this of like there's going to be a big piece of recruiting departments is just focused on the transfer portal. It feels like you have to be able to do all of to build a successful team, you have to do a lot of things well, and that now includes the transfer portal. And as we've seen, a lot of players have gone into the transfer portal. It's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be interesting to continue to observe. I understand, again, why people have thoughts and concerns about this. So if you want to know more on this particular topic, Greg will have a deeper dive in tonight's recruiting notebook, 6 p.m. Central at hailvarsity.com. You can also check out the recruiting notebook 5 days a week, Sunday through Thursday. hailvarsity.com, 6 p.m. Central. It's the same every week. So that way it's appointment reading. You know it's going to be there. You can go ahead and bookmark it. Just plan on it every evening, because a lot of these topics that so many of you want to dive into have been addressed or will be addressed in the recruiting notebook. And many times the conversations that you have right here on YouTube end up finding their ways into the recruiting notebook. So be sure to check those out. But we do appreciate the questions, the comments, the conversation. So keep having that here on YouTube, or you can tweet at Greg, at Greg Smith HV, or at Hail Varsity on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. It's just great to continue to have these conversations, whether I know some of you agree or don't agree with everything, and that's okay. But we do appreciate the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Always appreciate the conversation.
And we will be back again next week with even more. We appreciate, like I said, you tuning in. Be sure to share our YouTube channel with somebody if you haven't. If you haven't subscribed, go and do that right now. That way you will always be alerted to when there's a new video. And we hope to have even more of these type of videos into the new year. So if there's something that you want to hear from us about, if there are topics that you want covered, be sure to let us know, because these are things then we can be sure to start planning for here on this YouTube channel and beyond. Greg, before I let you go, any final words?
We will eventually get back to transfer quarterback talk. I know you guys are waiting. I got the most questions about that, but it's just not a lot of new information. I'm sorry, but I'm working on it.
There are quarterbacks going in the portal every moment. I think pretty
right,
sure before we started
now,
recording this, like somebody just went in. Yeah, it is. It is just one of those times. We will, like Greg said, we will have more on transfer quarterbacks. Do not worry. This is not a topic that I think is going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So, well, fingers crossed somewhere soon. So that way I hope we're not talking about transfer quarterbacks in like March.
Hopefully not.
I just have no sense of time any longer. So like when I say that, like 24 hours feels like 3 weeks. So it's fine.
Yes.
Fine.
That's fine.
Well, we will talk to you all later. Thank you as always, Greg. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.